I'm sorry.
You don't have to follow along. You just listen, and please stop me if you have any questions.
Oh, you don't know me that well by now. Believe me, I will. 278.
If I get irritated, I'll let you know.
Okay, that's fine.
268.
Oh, 268.
Yeah, 268. Parshas Vayechi. So let's just. What are we talking about in the Torah? Where are we up to in this week's Torah reading? Last week we had. Right,
we missed last week's class.
So I'll review. No problem. A few weeks ago. Oh, see, I knew it.
See?
All right, so in the last couple of weeks, we were talking about the story of Yosef and his brothers. Right, we had the brothers were jealous of Yosef, and they sold him into slavery, and he wound up in Egypt. He was wound up a slave in Egypt, and then he was thrown in jail. He interpreted Pharaoh's servants' dreams, and then he became the head of Pharaoh's household, became the second in command in Egypt, and he predicted correctly. He prophesied through Pharaoh's dreams that there was going to be a famine, and because of that, they saved food, and people had to come from all around to get food from Egypt. And then eventually his brothers come, and his brothers as a whole back and forth, and they go back and forth a few times, and in the end of the day, he finally reveals himself. He says, Ani Yosef out of Ichai, I am Joseph, is my father still alive? And the brothers and Yosef embrace, and they make up after he rebukes them, and then the brothers come down to Egypt, and that's how the Jewish people wind up in Egypt, which, spoiler alert, they're going to become slaves. That's next week's class. But before that, so Yaakov, Yosef, we have Yaakov, the father of the Shvatim, the 12 tribes. He comes down with all of the tribes and their children, and there are 70 descendants. 70 descendants came down to Egypt, right? And we discussed in previous weeks. I can email you the classes if you want exactly why the brothers, right? If you just read the Torah as it's written, it seems like the brothers did a horrible thing by selling Yosef into slavery and how it led to this. But when we have the oral tradition, we have the Talmud and we have the Midrashim, the different oral traditions explaining what happened. The sin that they did was very, very small, and really what was going on is they legitimately thought Yosef was trying to kill them and take their portion in this world and the next world. And we talked about in the previous week's classes, or how you even see that from the Torah itself and how you see from the different oral traditions, how that's clear. That's what really was going on.
I'm going to ask a very stupid question.
No question is stupid. Well, most questions aren't stupid.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. What's the difference between the Torah and the Bible?
Not a stupid question at all. Well, Bible is just.
I mean, I know what the
right.
Bible is. Yeah,
right.
The Bible.
So it depends what I think. Bible is a Greek word originally, but when I Torah. Well, let's start at the beginning. There's the 5 books of Moses. That's what we're learning now.
Right.
That the 5 books of Moses have a special status. They were given to Moses on Mount Sinai, said over by God, word by word, and
right.
Moses wrote it down.
Right.
They have a higher level than everything else. Those are the 5 books of Moses. That's Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. That's what we have in front of us.
Okay.
That's what we read in Shul every week, and every year we finish reading it. Then we have Nevi'im and Ksuvim. We have the welcome. We have the prophets and the judges. That's sorry, not the prophets and the prophets and the writings called Nach, Nevi'im, and Ksuvim. Please. Hello.
Book. We're on 269.
268.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's 269. Same, both pages.
Well, yeah.
Which is explaining the difference between the Bible and the Torah and the oral Torah. So we have that. So we have the Torah, and then we have the Nevi'im, which are the prophets, and the Ksuvim, which are the writings. Together, that's Tanakh. That's what the Christians call the Old Testament. Right.
Yeah, that's trying
right.
to get you riled up.
Right. The reason actually they call it the Old Testament is because they believe their religion superseded ours.
Oh, exactly. Yeah.
And that's why they. Right. I also try not to use the term, but just as a frame of reference.
I go crazy when on JBS they use the term.
Oh, really? The Jewish broadcasters?
Oh, yeah. I go bananas when they use that term.
No, you have a good point. It implies that it doesn't exist
it's not
anymore.
Relevant. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So then that's what we will call the written Torah, and then we have what's also the oral Torah. That's there's books behind you with little crowns on top. This is the Talmud. So the Talmud is the oral tradition which was originally passed, was given over orally from God to Moses, and was passed over generation to generation until it came a point in Jewish history where people started forgetting what was in the writing, and we were not in Israel anymore. We were getting dispersed throughout the world, and it was written down in the Talmud, which is we wrote down the oral Torah. And there's different parts of the oral Torah. If you were driving by East Rutherford last week, there were 90,000 Jews
I saw that, yeah.
Right, MetLife Stadium, and they were what they do, they have a special cycle where every day they study a page of Talmud, and if you do that, there's 2,711 pages. It takes 7.5 years, right? So there are 90,000 Jews that were celebrating that. And,
that was just there because they did in other parts of the country too.
Yeah, they had one in Chicago a few days ago, and I think they said there were 1 million people live streaming it.
Yeah, there was. They showed you just several locations on TV. Yeah,
there was a guy there. He was at the last one in 2012. I didn't go to this one, but I was at the last one, and he said obviously he was so inspired that he said that he's gonna finish the Talmud this time, and he did it. The only thing is that he has ALS and he could only move his eyes. Oh. And every day he studied with his study partner one-on-one, and he has a thing where he can move his eyes and you can point the eyes to the letters on the computer and communicate, and he was able to finish the Talmud a page a day, doing that. It just makes it made me feel really inadequate, anything that I do. If this guy can finish the Talmud in 7.5 years. There's actually, as my friend told me, there was somebody driving home on the parkway, and a state trooper pulled him over, and he's an Orthodox Jewish guy, and the state trooper said to him, you're speeding, I can give you a ticket. Did you do your page today? He said, my page? He's like, your page of Talmud. He said, no, I didn't do it yet. He's like, I'll make a deal with you. If you do your page of Talmud, I won't give you a ticket. And that's what happened. Okay. So, right. So the point we were making before was that if you read the verses of the Torah, we were talking about the story of Joseph, and that if you read just the written Torah, it seems like the brothers, when they sold him, they did a really horrible thing. And we said while there was a sin that they did to some level, when we look at the oral tradition of how we interpret the Torah, it's not so simple that way, right? Other religions, they only have what we call the written Torah, and they don't have an oral tradition how to interpret it, because if you don't have an oral tradition, there's really no way that you could properly interpret the written Torah, right? You need to have an oral tradition for any text to properly understand it. So we have an oral tradition which shows us that the brothers really were somewhat legitimately in their minds afraid of Yosef and what they might do, and they took what they thought were the necessary precautions. Obviously they made a mistake, and they had to atone for it, and the Jewish people atoned for it, but it's not as egregious as it seems in the verses. So we have where we're leaving off here is the Jewish people is now in Egypt, and they are Yaakov is about to die. He got sick, and he's about to die, and he is coming to bless his children, the 12 tribes, before he goes. So we start the Parsha. First thing he asks Yosef, his son, who was in charge, he was the second in command in Egypt, he says, please don't bury me in Egypt. So there are 3 reasons why he did not want to be buried in Egypt. One is because in the plague, the sands were going to turn to lice, so he didn't want to be in that. 2 is that when after Mashiach comes and we get resurrected from the dead, a person's bones get dragged underground to Israel. So he wanted to be in Israel, so he didn't have to go through that. And the 3rd reason was because he didn't want the Egyptians making him into an idol. Jacob was revered in Egypt. He was considered a very holy person, and he thought that if he would die and be buried there, then the Egyptians would make him into an idol, which would be very bad. So then we have Yaakov blessing everybody. So first he blesses Ephraim and Manasseh, who were the children of Yosef. So let's go to page 272, 4820, which is Mem Ches Chaf. It says, so now we have Yosef, who is, again, the son of Yaakov. He brings his 2 children to get blessed by Yaakov before he dies. It says, Vayivarchem bayom hahu, Lemor, V'cha yivarech Yisrael, Lemor, Yesimcha Elokim ke Ephraim v'chim Menashe, V'yasim es Ephraim lifnei Menashe. So it says here that after he blessed them, he said, so you should bless now your children, that the Jewish people should bless their children in the name of Ephraim and Menashe. And he put Ephraim before Menashe. Right? Menashe was actually the older son, but Ephraim, the younger son, was considered more worthy to a certain extent, and he was blessed, given the more prominent blessing. Yeah, when the children were brought over to Yaakov to be blessed, he switched his hands like this. So Ephraim got the right hand, and Menashe got the left hand, because the right hand is the more prominent hand. Now, what's interesting is that on Friday night, after we make Kiddush, we bless the boys. The parents bless the boys that they should be like Ephraim and Menashe. And the Torah is telling us that we should bless our children like Ephraim and Menashe. Question: why are we blessing the children like Ephraim and Menashe? There are many, many great Jews who lived throughout history, many great Jewish men. Moses, for example, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. Why specifically do we bless the children in the name of Ephraim and Menashe? Any theories?
They were...
Besides the fact the Torah tells us to.
I mean, they were the first ones who weren't born in Israel.
Oh, Rav David Feinstein says something like you're saying.
Oh, it's really?
Nice. I'll expand on that
You're
here.
born in exile, and we're in exile, so
Oh, you're both Mechamed to Rav David Feinstein. Very good.
I don't know where I learned it from a long time ago.
Very good. Maybe it's a common thing. So I want to tell you what Rabbi Aaron Feldman said first, the Rosh Hashiva of Ner Israel in Baltimore. He said that really, right? Why don't we bless our kids in the name of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, their forefathers? So he said that they were the forefathers. It's not possible really for us to be at the level of the forefathers. They were a totally separate level where things that they did actually affected the DNA of the Jewish people for all time. For example, I'm expounding on what he said. So if I'm saying something, whoever's listening to this online, if I say something in error, it's me, David Rosenthal, not my Reshiva, who said it in error, because I'm expounding on what he said. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, for instance, the attributes that they had affected the Jewish people for all time. Isaac was willing to give up his life for the sake of God. Right, that's how we right on Mount Moriah, when his father took him up, he was willing to be sacrificed because God said so. That's how the Jewish people have throughout all time, in the Spanish Inquisition, in the Holocaust, in the Crusades, and a million other time periods in history, have been able to give up their lives for the sake of God, rather than to violate their faith. Even people that were ostensibly not religious, right? When it came push to shove, and someone said, "Hey, convert to a different religion or die," Jews were most often ready to give up their life. That came from Yitzchak, the fact that Jews are known to do chesed, kindness. That was from Abraham, who was known as that was his attribute. He was a tremendously kind person and did chesed and helped people to the exclusion of himself. And Jews have been like that. Rabbi Leib Kelman, in his book, A Permission to Receive, actually speaks about examples of how Jews are the most philanthropic peoples statistically. And there was even a statistic in the 1950s that more Jews favored integration between blacks and whites than actually African Americans did. So just that Jews have this attitude of kindness, and the DNA of the Jewish people was fixed through the Avos. So we have those attributes that our forefathers had of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and also the Shvatim the tribes to a certain extent. But it's not possible for us to get at that level where we can affect generations like that, and we can be at the level of the Avos. However, what were Ephraim and Manasseh? They were the generation after. It was their mission to carry on what the Avos, what the forefathers taught the world. And they were carrying that on to the future, and that's what we can do. We can bless our children to be a continuation of what the forefathers established. Right? We can't be the forefathers because we're not establishing a religion. That was done already. But we can be the continuation, like Ephraim and Manasseh were, to bring forward the tradition of the forefathers. Now, back to what you guys said from Rav David Feinstein. He actually asks. He asked another question, right? One is, why do we bless the children of Ephraim and Manasseh? And the second question, right? We're saying to the children, be like Ephraim and Manasseh. How do you give a blessing that someone becomes righteous? You can't bless someone to do that. You only become righteous if you have free will and you choose to do good over evil. So how is it possible to bless someone to be righteous? So he answers that really it is 100%. It's your choice whether you want to be righteous or you want to be evil. But God can help you. And he says what we're doing is we're blessing the children that God should help them become righteous. He shouldn't give them too many challenges, and they should have the ability to make that decision to become righteous. And specifically Ephraim and Manasseh, for the reason you gave. They were the first people in the Jewish people. All the other tribes and their children grew up in Israel. They grew up in the house of Yaakov. They were just brought up, and they were weaned on this spirituality and love of Hashem and God. And of course, it's not such a chiddush, as you would say, for them to be successful in Judaism and be successful as good people and in their spirituality. But Ephraim and Manasseh, they grew up not only outside of Israel, not only away from Yaakov, but Egypt was known as the most corrupt, decadent place in the world. And despite that, growing up there, they still grew up to be very righteous people. So the fact that they grew up in Egypt, this disgusting place, and yet became so elevated spiritually, we're blessing our children that they should have the strength to be successful spiritually, given all the challenges that they may have. Yeah, and it says in the Medrash, we're saying that God helps you to become righteous, right? If a person decides, for instance, right, a person has to make a decision. Let's say he has a store. He's open 7 days a week, so people are afraid to close their store on Shabbos because maybe they won't be able to provide for their family if they close that extra day. I know in Baltimore, I was told in the 1950s it was a big. I know someone who grew up there then. I'm sure it was in a lot of places, but they were afraid to close their store on Shabbos because everyone got their paycheck on Friday, and if their store wasn't open, these people would go to other stores and they would lose out their business. So it was a very big challenge to keep Shabbos because they didn't want to lose the parnasa. But so a person can daven to Hashem, or he can be blessed by Hashem to not have those challenges, in the sense that maybe God will make a person so successful the other 6 days of the week that he won't be tempted to keep his house open on Shabbos. So that's where we can pray, and there it's shaykh to make to ask for a blessing, to be like Ephraim and Menashe, to be righteous. Even though we can't ask God to make us righteous, but we can ask God to help us along the way. And the Medrash writes, Pesach kechudash al machat v'ni eftach lachem kepischo shel ulam. If you make for yourself an opening the size of a pin, I will open up for you the size of a great hall. Meaning, if we just make a small effort to get close to God, He's going to help us a tremendous amount along the way. And it's not a big thing that we need to do. We just need to open up a little bit. Rabbi Franted, the Siyam Hashas, said, "Don't let perfection be the enemy of the good." Right? Don't think that we want to grow spiritually. We have to be totally successful. You just try, and if I'm not totally successful, I'm not even going to try. So all we have to do is we have to try a little bit. And if we try a little bit, then God will help us the rest of the way. Okay. Oh, I heard other reasons why we bless the name of Ephraim and Menashe. One is I heard from Rav Nachum Kass, who is my Rosh Kollel, in the name of Rav Felder from Toronto. He said that even though Ephraim was greater and he was younger, right, like we mentioned, Yaakov switched his hands over and gave the prominent blessing to the younger son, and there could have been a lot of enmity between them. They got along nevertheless. So that's a specific thing that we would like to pass along to our children. And also, generations in Judaism, we said generations usually go down in stature and greatness. The further we are from Mount Sinai, when the Torah was given, that was when the Jewish people had the most spiritual clarity. And the further we get from Mount Sinai, from the giving of the Torah, we're further away from that event, we're further away from connecting to God, we get a lower level than the generation before. Ephraim and Menashe were an exception. It says that Kiruvin v'Shimon Yuli, that when we went to the land of Israel, the land was divided up with the 12 tribes, and Yosef didn't have a portion, but his sons Ephraim and Menashe had a portion, just like the other tribes. So here you have Ephraim and Menashe at the same level as their uncles. So usually, while the Jewish people goes down, Ephraim and Menashe were going up. So we bless them we bless our children that they should go up like Ephraim and Menashe, go up in a level. It's also interesting, given the fact that they went up a level, despite the fact that they grew up in Egypt, which was very bad place. Okay. Any questions thus far? Good? Okay. Next topic. Let's go to page 274. Oh, we're on 274. Tricked you. Okay. What? Oh, 49:1. It says, Vayikor Yaakov el Banav. So again, Yaakov is about to pass away. He calls to his children, Vayomer, He asvu va'agidu lechem, Eis asher yikra eschem ba'achris hayamim. Yaakov comes and he calls his children in front of him and he says, I would like to tell you what will happen at the end of days. Meaning he wants to tell them when Mashiach is going to come. He wants to tell them when the world will be perfected, there will be peace on earth and everything. And all of a sudden, he forgets. He doesn't do it. So what happens? Where's Rashi? Rashi says, Va'agidu lachem, bikesh legalos es haketz, v'nistalka mimenu shchina, v'hischal omer dvarim acherim. That's not here. Oh, it's the Gemara. Rashi says that he was about to reveal to his children when the end of days were coming. The end of days would come, and God's presence left him, and he started talking about other things. So I would like to read here a Gemara, part of what we were talking about before, the Talmud in Psachim, Daf Nun Vav 56. Tan Rabbanan. I'm not going to start from there. I'm going to start from later. So he quotes the Bikesh Yaakov Lagalos the Ban of Ketz Hayamim. It says that Yaakov wanted to teach his children, Jacob wanted to tell his children when the end of days would come. When he stalked mimenu shchina, God's presence left him. Amar Shemach Chas v'Shalom Yesh b'mitasi psul ke Avraham sheyatz mimenu Yishmael v'Avi Yitzchak sheyatz mimenu Esav. Yaakov noticed that the divine presence left him, and he got nervous. Maybe one of my children doesn't merit to hear when the end of days will come, and maybe one of my children isn't righteous. He's not deserving of knowing when the end of days will come, right? Because we do have a precedent for that in Judaism. Abraham, he had a child who was Yitzchak, who was righteous, and there was another child, Yishmael, who was evil. And then we had Yitzchak had two children, Yaakov and Esav. Yaakov was righteous, and Esav was evil. So Yaakov thought maybe one of his children was
Hello.
was not. I get a little nervous every time a door opens now in the synagogue.
Yeah, I know, yeah.
Yeah, it's sad, but
Yes, it is sad.
yeah. No, it's today. Someone came to Marv late in another shul I was at, and I got like nervous. They were like, this car came really fast, and there was someone running, and I was just like looking out the window, making sure I knew who it
I
was.
think it's very, very sad.
Yeah, we are sitting
And
ducks.
You'd be crazy not
apparently.
to be
Yeah,
at least careful.
yeah. All right. So that's what happened. He was worried that one of his children wasn't fit to hear, and the reason he was so nervous about that was because he needed these 12 tribes to be the future of the Jewish people, and if one of them wasn't fit, wasn't a good, that would not be a positive thing. Amrulo Banav. So the children knew that he was nervous. So what did the children do? They said, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one. They said the declaration of the Jewish people of faith in Hashem, that there's one God. And they said, Amru, Kishem she'en belivcha ela echad, kach ein belibenu ela echad. Just like in your heart, there's only one God, we also only believe that there's one God. Ba'oso shah, Pasach Yaakov Avinu va'amar Baruch Shem Kivod Malchuso Leolam Va'ed. At that point, Yaakov says, "Blessed is blessed." Wait a second. Right, blessed is God's kingship, His name and His kingdom forever and ever. Right, and that's what we say when we read the Shema twice a day. We say Shema, and then we say Baruch Shem Kivod Malchuso Leolam Va'ed. The Gemara continues. So Amri Rabbanan Heichi Navid. Now, what do we do when we read Shema? Now, they're telling us what happened in the parsha, the back and forth between Yaakov and his children. Now, the Gemara wants to know, what do we do when we read Shema? Do we know what we do, by the way? We say it quietly, right? We say Shema out loud, and then we whisper Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuso Leolam Va'ed. So, why do we do that? That's what the Gemara is discussing. Why do we do that? Except for Yom Kippur. We'll talk about that also. The rabbi said, how should we do it? Namruhu lo amru Moshe Rabbeinu lo namru. Well, if you want to say it, Moshe didn't say it, right? If we look at Shema in the Torah, when it's in Deuteronomy, when it's written out, right? Shema, the prayer that we say is actually in the Torah, which was written by Moses. Moses did not write Baruch Shem Kivod Malchuso Leolam Va'ed. So how can we say it if Moses didn't put it in the Torah? The Gemara says. And then the Gemara says, but wait a minute, Yaakov did say it. So what do we do? On one hand, Yaakov said it, right, in this Gemara. When the children said Shema, he said Baruch Shem. Moses did not say it, so what should we do? So the rabbi said we should say it quietly. It's like a compromise position. Amr Rabbi Yitzchak, Amr Debei Rabbi Yami, Mashal Abbas Melech She'eriach Tzike Kedera, Im Tomer Yesh Lo Ganai, Lo Tomer Yesh Lo Tzar, Hischilu Avdil Havia B'Chashai. So, and they said it's like a parable. There was this princess who liked eating the Tzike Kedera, which is considered like a very low-level type of food. It's like a fish fillet sandwich at McDonald's or something, like a disgusting type of food. But she had a desire for it. So what did they do? Her servants brought it to her in secret, so she could eat it in secret and no one would know about it. And that's the parable of why we say Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuso Leolam Va'ed quietly. Now, what does that have to do with anything? So the idea of Baruch Shem Kivod Malchuso Leolam Va'ed, blessed is the name of God and His kingdom forever and ever. It's translated by the Targum, or the Aramaic translation, as Yehei Shmei Rabba Mevorach Le'olam Olomei Maya, that we say during Kaddish, which is really that God's name should be great. What do we do? Why does everyone, during Kaddish, we all say Yehei Shmei Rabba Mevorach Le'olam Olomei Maya? What are we saying when we do that? In some yeshivas, you go and they scream it really, really loud. What's the idea behind that? The idea is that we are praying to God that God's name should be great, and that's the end of days, right? We always say, Mashiach should come, Mashiach should come. What's so great about Mashiach? When Mashiach comes, the whole world is going to recognize that there's one God, and that we're here to fulfill His will. And obviously, once we recognize that, there's going to be peace on earth and all of those good things. But that's the main idea, is that there's one God and the whole world recognizes Him. So that's what we say, Yehei Shmei Rabba. We say it very loudly and we pray, and that's what we want to happen. Now, Moses didn't write it in the Torah. Why? Because I don't know if you're aware of this, but the world is not at that point now where the whole world recognizes Hashem, recognizes God, and everything is going great. So we can't really say it loud, because that's not the truth. That's not where we are. And also, we see from the fact that God made the world like this, God didn't want to make the world where everything is perfect and everyone recognizes him. He wanted us to have free will, and he wanted us to perfect the world to get to that stage. So we're caught between a catch-22 in a way. On the one hand, we want the goal of humanity to get to this point where everyone recognizes Hashem. But on the other hand, we are in a world that's imperfect, and it wouldn't be honest for us to say it out loud. To declare it. So what do? We do a compromise. We say, Baruch Shem Kivod Malchuso Le'olam Va'ed, we say it quietly. And we do it quietly to show that even though we want the world to get to that point, we recognize that we're not there yet and we can't really say it out loud. Except on Yom Kippur, which is a day of total spirituality, when God's presence is just totally palpable for us. So there we say Baruch Shem Kivod Malchuso Le'olam Va'ed out loud because of that reality of God, His presence. And that's the parable with this princess. She wanted to eat the food, but she couldn't do it. She couldn't do it publicly. She had to do it quietly. But again, the idea is that we're ashamed in a way. We want the world to be where God is totally supreme and the whole world recognizes Him. But since we're not there, and the world is definitely not at that point, we are embarrassed that we're not there. Rabbi Akiva actually thought that Bar Kochba, I don't know if you heard of the Bar Kochba revolts in the time of Hadrian, Rabbi Akiva thought that he was the Messiah, he was Mashiach, because he was, in addition to being a general, he was also a big rabbi who taught people Torah, and he got people to follow the Torah. In addition to that, he fought the Romans, and he was very successful for a while, that Rabbi Akiva actually thought that he was the Messiah. Now, the Rambam says, how do you know someone's the Messiah? When he rebuilds the temple in Jerusalem, that's how we know he's the Messiah. So it's definitely coming through the Jewish people, and once that happens, the entire world will recognize that there is one God, and then it says the knowledge of Hashem will just be apparent to everybody. Right? Mesilas Yesharim talks about how this world, with its physicality, is like we're just like in darkness, and when the Messiah comes, it's not going to be like that anymore. Everything will be clear. Okay, I just want to finish off with one thing. It's very, very interesting. When they went to after Jacob gives all the blessings to his children, he passes away, and the 12 tribes, they take him to be buried in Israel. They follow his request and they bury him in Israel. And guess who shows up at the funeral? His Esav, right? Dun dun dun. Esav says, "Hey, this is my burial plot. You can't bury your father here." And they start going back and forth. And he says, "What are you talking about? You sold it to our father." He says, "Oh yeah? Show me the deed of sale." So Naphtali, who was very quick, started running back to Egypt to get the deed of sale. And they're all hanging around. And Yaakov is sitting there totally disgraced. So what happens? Hushim ben Dan, the son of Dan, comes and he chops off Esav's head with a sword. And that was the end of that. And his head rolled in to Marsa Machpelah, the cave of Machpelah in Hebron. So Rav Chaim Shmulevitz points out what's going on in this story. Why specifically Hushim ben Dan? Why was he the one who just couldn't take it anymore? He saw his grandfather lying there disgraced. Right? Imagine, God forbid, a loved one dies and you're about to bury them, and some jerk comes and says, "Oh, you have the paperwork for this." The union comes up. We can't bury him right now because of regulations. So Hushim ben Dan was deaf. He couldn't hear. He didn't know what was going on. He saw them talking. He didn't know what was happening. So all the other brothers, they started entering into conversation. Oh, you have the deed. You don't have the deed. Right? Little by little, they started forgetting about their grandfather who is lying out there disgraced. Hushim ben Dan didn't hear the whole conversation. He just sees, I don't know what's going on. My grandfather's lying out there disgraced. Like, I can't stand for this. And he chops his head off. And the Rav Chaim Shmulevitz writes about how did Jews survive, for instance, like horrible things during the Holocaust. He said it wasn't just like they were tortured right away, but little by little they got into that. So little by little, when you enter into a situation, you start getting used to it, and you don't realize what's going on. But Hushim ben Dan, who was deaf and didn't know what was going on, it was just grandfather lying there. I got to take care of this. So he took care of it. That's what he did. So also, the Yetzer Hara, sometimes the evil inclination tricks us by getting into things little by little. And have to stay strong. Any questions?
More to follow.
Okay. Hope to see you next week.